Welcome to our webinar tonight. I'm Alan Peterson, the Executive Director of the Compassionate Friends, and this is the first in a series of monthly webinars on the subject of grief and loss, and specifically the loss of a child, grandchild, or sibling. Part of the work of the Compassionate Friends is to provide support in all areas of grief and loss. And tonight we have a very special guest, Allie Franklin, and the title of our webinar is How Do I Help My Child Grieving the Loss of a Sibling? And I am so often asked the question for bereaved parents, especially, you know, I'm in grief and I'm struggling to find my way through grief. My child or my children are grieving, and I just don't know how to help them. And so we understand that children and parents grieve differently. And so tonight our special guest, Allie Franklin, is going to help us understand that a little bit, not only from her own experience, but as a professional. Let me tell you a little bit about Allie. She's the author of Am I Still a Sister? And a contributing author in Dear Parents and the Dying and Bereaved Teenager. And she also co-authored with her mom, the fabulous Darcy Sims, a dear friend of all of ours, Footsteps Through Grief, The Other Side of Grief, and Finding Your Way Through Grief. Allie, you're a former captain in the Air Force, you're a dear friend, and I want to thank you so much for being here tonight. And first and foremost, I want to say that you're Big A, Austin's sister. Tell us a little bit about your journey into grief and your work in the grief world.
Thank you so much, Alan, for having me. It's an honor to be here, and I'm happy to help. I'm so excited that we're talking about how to help surviving siblings, because so many years ago when my brother died, there were a lot of questions about whether children even grieved. And so it's so exciting to me that we're having this conversation. My brother died 38 years ago today, actually.
Wow.
And I was the only surviving sibling in our family. And so there were a lot of questions about, am I still a sister? How many brothers and sisters do you have? And how do we as a grieving family find a way to talk to each other with the differences in our losses, and with each one of us sometimes feeling like we were speaking a different language. So it's really exciting to me that families are having these conversations and that people are asking these questions, and that now I can be on the side of helping.
Well, thank you so much, Allie. And you know, not only are you a dear friend, I know that you've spent many years doing this work, and I love the title of your webinar. Your own spin on the title is Are There Twinkies in Heaven? Or Twinkies in Heaven, and I think that's a great title. How did you come up with that?
Well, thank you. You know, Alan, this was actually my question. When my brother died and we were getting ready for his funeral, I just couldn't imagine sending my brother off to this strange place, because at the time I didn't understand so much about heaven and death, and so I couldn't imagine sending him off to this strange place without some Twinkies along the way, because I figured that God and the angels would take care of the vegetables and the fruit and all the healthy food, but you really need a big sister to make sure that you've got the Twinkies that go along with you. So we stuffed his casket filled with Twinkies just to be sure.
Well, the first thing, Allie, that we want to talk about, obviously, is that, you know, it changes our family. You know, when we have a death of a child, a grandchild, or a sibling, it not only are we grieving the loss, but we're grieving the loss of our family as we knew it. So can you talk a little bit about some of the family changes that we go through when we're grieving?
I absolutely can, although I will need your help moving the slide forward because I don't seem to have control anymore.
All right.
So, you know, Alan, one of the reasons why this is so important to talk about is that not only is a person going through the death of their sibling, but there's so many other things that are all happening at the same time. I think about it as layering of losses. So we think about when we're a family where there hasn't been a death in the family, our focus is on activities and school and how do we get to everything that we need to do and our schedule and the day-to-day life kind of things that we think about. When someone has died, suddenly the focus changes. And for surviving siblings, often what happens is that people will come to them and say, how are your parents doing? And, you know, how's your mom? Or how is your dad? And so all of a sudden, a sibling may feel lost in the shuffle. And
Allie?
Yes.
Yeah, along that line, so I think looking at the slide, one of the things that I hear a lot of times that I don't think necessarily as parents or grandparents that we necessarily understand is that the role of the child changes. And that's kind of what you're driving at a little bit?
Absolutely. And the other piece is that when a sibling dies, we think about where do you fit in the family. Are you the firstborn? Are you the middle? Are you the baby? Kind of where does that fit? And then there are a lot of questions about, am I expected to take on the role that my sibling is no longer there to fill? And so there can be questions about, am I supposed to now be, and I've talked to kids where there's been a parent and a sibling who has died, and they'll say, am I supposed to be the man in the house, or am I the mom now? How do I fit in this family picture, and what is expected of me, and also what am I prepared to do?
So can be very confusing for children. And then, as I know in my particular case, my boys, I was so deep in grief that I really couldn't understand, how to help myself, let alone how on earth am I going to help my children. I put them in a little grief class for a few weeks, and I figured, well, they got what they needed, and they're going to be okay. I think they were trying to be strong for me, and I think that's a role oftentimes, don't you agree, that a lot of siblings play, just trying to be strong or invisible or trying to, not make waves so that it's not any harder for mom and dad while they're going through it.
That can happen, or sometimes you can see the opposite. You can see someone who's feeling invisible, and so they do something to become very visible, so kind of noisy. We sometimes will hear about people saying, my kid is acting out. And really what they're doing is saying, I don't know how to ask for your attention in the way that you'd like, so I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to ask for it in a different way.
Or they have to say, I'm still here, I guess, is the thing. And sometimes when we're in our grief, we forget that they are still here, and all of our focus is on our child that's died.
Exactly. Being able to say, aren't my pictures important too? Isn't what I'm doing important too?
Yeah. Talk a little bit about the myths and some of the misunderstandings.
Absolutely. I wanted to say about misunderstandings because it ties together with something from the earlier slide around secrets. Sometimes in our wish to protect children from gory details or from difficult things, we can create a situation where sometimes kids may see that as a secret. I don't really know how my brother died. It's kind of a secret. And as soon as we get to a space like that, then it becomes frightening and scary because let me tell you that kids, grown-ups too, but kids have amazing imaginations. And so when we don't fill in the blanks, and I'm not talking about going to every single detail when it's not developmentally appropriate, but when we leave something as a secret or there's a lot of whispering going on, kids will fill in the blanks with awful things. And so it's really important that we give enough information so that a young person understands that they are included and that they are a part of the story, because otherwise some other myth will be created.
And Allie, don't you think?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Of course, we're trying to explain to people that you're in the Seattle area. I'm in Sacramento right now, so we're trying to figure out the best way to communicate here. So I apologize if I jumped in on you there because I was looking ahead to the next slide, and I think where you're headed to is that we grieve a certain way as everybody grieves differently, but as a parent, we grieve in our own unique way. And so what you're saying is there's really no a blanket way to describe how our child is grieving. Each child would grieve differently. Each journey would be different. So to try to make something fit for them doesn't really work, does it?
That's exactly right. And a big myth that people have about children, and it fits in with this slide too, is that children are resilient. So people are sometimes resilient, but and the idea is that they bounce back or they don't grieve. And let me give you an example. If you have a young person who's at a funeral and they aren't necessarily crying at that moment, or they are off wanting to talk with friends or play, sometimes people will say, see, kids don't grieve. This is evidence that kids don't grieve. Or maybe I'm worried that my child isn't grieving because I don't see them sitting around crying all the time. And I'll tell you, as a counselor, I've gotten a lot of folks who come in and say, my child's not grieving because I don't see them cry. And yet children really grieve very differently than adults. Adults are able to stay in the moment and sustain a strong emotion for a longer period of time. Maybe it's because we've been trained as grown-ups that we have to sit through long meetings. But for kids, they touch a strong emotion, they go very deep into the strong emotion, and then they need to bounce away from it. A little bit like kind of a super ball or a ping pong ball. Hits very hard, and then it bounces away, but it does come back to the pain. It does come back to the difficult times. So what I've seen, and my parents used to say that I would do this all the time, and I get it now that I'm a grown-up, that I would come in. In fact, my favorite story that my mom told is that I came in the middle of television one day. I stood right in front of the television, because that's the best way to get a grown-up's attention when there's a football game on, and said, I did not intend to be single. And so I was having a really tough moment where, here I was, the surviving sibling. I needed them to hear what I had to say. I said my piece. I left the room. I went off and did something else. My parents, however, were crushed for the rest of the evening, and who knows how the football game ended, because they were now having a really tough time.
Wow.
And so it's really important for us to make sure that we validate that even though children grieve differently, they are still grieving, and they're still having a really strong, deep emotion. They're just having it in a really different way than we as grown-ups express them and experience them.
Well, I think that's something that we get blindsided by a little bit as parents also, is that, like you said, we, we'll see our children and we'll think they're hurting, and then, I would see my boys out playing basketball and yucking it up, and I'd go, well, they're okay. It's easy to think that they're okay, but they maybe grieve all the time, but I've heard it said children grieve in spurts, which is what you just said so well. So we have to remember that children are not adults, and we have to look at their grief differently and begin to try to understand it.
Absolutely, and that the things that are helpful to us as adults may or may not be helpful to kids. The other thing that's really important is that what is helpful to one adult may not be helpful to a different adult. And so really figuring out not only what works best for that child based on their developmental stages, which we'll get to in a second, but also what works best for that child. So, two kids in the same family, one thing might be helpful to one child and really not helpful to another. And so taking the time to have lots of invitations to kids and give them a lot of different ways to express their emotions. Kids, unlike adults, are not likely to come up and say, this is how I feel. Remember, adults have had a long time and a lot of practice at identifying what is the feeling that's going on. If you talk to a kid and they say, I don't know how I feel, they're not putting you off or having a bad attitude. They may not be able to give a name to the feeling. And so sometimes being able to talk it through and say, sometimes I feel really confused about what's going on too, can sometimes open the door to a conversation rather than saying, how are you feeling right now? Because the kid's looking at you going, I really don't know. It's not good, but I don't know.
So it really comes down to, Allie, each child, depending on their age and their development, there really is a difference in maybe how they're grieving or their understanding of the death or understanding of grief. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yes, and before we get into, and I've got some wonderful, the slides we're going to go through while I'm talking about this are actual quotes from real children, and some of them are really fun to read through and to look at. But I think it's really important, Alan, for us as grown-ups, and this is the thing that is the most different between kids and adults, is that kids will experience loss differently as they age. So they really, truly have a different understanding about death and what is going on as they age. So as they hit different developmental stages, it may seem as though they're actually grieving for the first time all over again. Let me give you some examples. So we're going to talk about a couple of different, 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to talk about 4 different age groups, and I think you'll be able to catch where they are as you look at these slides and see what they say. So even, well, I guess 5 if we include infants, even infants grieve. An infant in a grieving family can tell that there is stress going on. that they're being held differently by a grieving family member, that the person who's holding them holds them differently. And so you'll see an infant being clingier or fussier, or maybe just having a harder time settling down or staying asleep. These are the ways that that infant, without language, can tell us, I know something's wrong and I can feel that something is wrong too.
Wow.
So it's so important that we understand every age of a child can experience the death of a loved one. And then as that child ages, they will begin to understand grief differently. So we'll start with our 3 to 5-year-olds. So our 3 to 5-year-olds are really interesting because they do not accept that death is a permanent process. Death has an ending, and they often ask questions like, when will my brother be done being dead? They see death as an abandonment. Why would my brother go off to this place called heaven and not any other time my brother's been gone, he calls or sends a postcard or comes back with presents? Or if he's off in this awesome place called heaven, how come I can't go visit him? If you ask a 3 to 5-year-old where is heaven, they will point to somewhere on a map, probably somewhere they haven't been yet.
Wow.
And so when people try to talk to a 3 to 5-year-old about death being permanent and that it's for everyone, they really, it's not that they're choosing not to understand, and it's not that they are not grieving. It means that they're not developmentally ready to understand that death is permanent and personal, that it happens to everyone. So they talk about someone will go to be with the angels. They're also very literal. I worked with a young man who said he couldn't wait to go to the funeral of his sister, and I said, oh, and why is that? And he said, I heard there will be polar bears there. And I couldn't figure out what he meant. And I finally, when I was talking with his dad, figured out that there were going to be pole bears there.
Oh, wow.
But in his mind, this 5-year-old was very excited about polar bears because that's what he heard, and that's what fit his frame of reference. And so no one could understand why he was so excited about the funeral. And then when we were able to finally help him understand that there were not going to be polar bears there, he was actually quite upset. The
Wow.
biggest fear for 3 to 5-year-old is the separation or the abandonment. And why is this taking so long? And then, so our 5 to 9-year-olds are beginning to understand that death is permanent, and yet it is not universal to them. So it's really important when we're talking to our 5 to 9-year-olds to avoid things like saying only the good die young, or giving reasons why a person died. When people try to use euphemisms and they say, oh, God needed another angel for the choir. So if you have somebody who doesn't want to die, then they're going to say, I'm going to sing as badly as I can, as loudly as I can, so everyone knows I should not be picked for the choir.
Wow.
Because for our 5 to 9-year-olds, they think about death as something personified, that it's like the boogeyman. It comes and snatches you, or it comes and gets you. They also believe that death can be avoided by staying away from the thing. So I've met kids who say, okay, so and we're asking them, why are you doing like everything? Why are you deliberately breaking things? Why are you throwing away your homework instead of turning it in? What's going on? Well, I heard that good people die, and I definitely am not ready to die yet. So I'm going to make sure that everyone is really clear that I'm not someone you should take. These kids are worried about the boogeyman. And if you've ever been helping out a child, make sure there are no monsters under the bed, or using monster spray around the house. This is somebody who has a 5 to 9-year-old thought. My mom used to talk about not dangling. So if you're a person who doesn't like to have a hand lean over the side of the bed, you may be coming at it from a 5 to 9-year-old standpoint because you're worried that maybe death is going to notice your hand and snatch you away.
Wow.
And we laughed a little bit about it right now, but for a 5 to 9-year-old, that's a very real concern. And I know that my mom used to say that I would sleep with a ton of stuffed animals, and it was really about wanting to make sure that that death came tonight, that she would have a really hard time picking out the one that was me.
Wow.
Probably end
So
up taking
kids
an
ask
ET doll instead.
a lot of questions, and so where is the person who died? We get confronted with that question as well.
Absolutely. And a lot of times you'll hear the answers that they've heard from someone else. Oh, well, they're in heaven. I love this one. He passed away, so I don't know where he is. I'm not sure where he passed away to. I heard somebody had told a young person in Iowa that their sister had bought the farm, and she said, well, that's awesome. I would love to go see the farm.
Yeah. Your mom used to tell the story one time when I interviewed her about saying to a child that we lost Grandpa. And she said, if we lost Grandpa, he's either down at Home Depot or Kmart. If we lost him, let's go find him. So, kids will take things literally. So we have to think about how we answer these questions, don't we?
Absolutely, and we have to be careful about our language, because in our being uncomfortable about using the correct words like died and dead, we can accidentally do some things that might make it scary. If we talk about someone has gone to sleep, and you can see this child was told by somebody that it's like going to sleep, you might get a child who's very afraid of going to sleep at night. Yeah. And so if a child sees the body at a visitation, being able to say, see, this is very different than how someone looks when they're asleep. That it is not like going to sleep. It is that the spirit is no longer in the body somewhere else. And that's really important. We'll get to that a little bit later. So when we get to our 9 to 12-year-olds, this is a fun group, because for them, they understand that when someone dies, it's permanent. They understand that all people will die, and that even they will die. But you see here, when I get old, not for a long time, in about 1 million years. So they're really hoping that it won't happen now. But 9 to 12-year-olds, these are the ones that all those horror movies were written for, even though they can't go in without an adult. They want to know about the blood and the guts and the gore. When they say, how did someone die, they want every detail. And part of it is about a fascination about where is the line between being alive and being dead. And it's not to gross people out, although 9 to 12-year-olds kind of like to gross people out too. But it really comes back to what is so hurt that you can be fixed, and what is so hurt that you are dead. When do you go from being alive to being dead, and what happens in that moment in between? So these are the ones where, it used to be when we'd go on road trips and there was a dead animal. My dad looked to the left, which means don't look at where the dead animal is. Well, you know what? So a 9 to 12-year-old actually wants you to pull over and look at the animal. Of course you can't, because that's not safe. Who knows what killed the animal. But 9 to 12-year-olds really do want to hear the details, and they may ask a lot of questions about when did they die? At what moment were they dead? What did they look like when they die? And so if that's too hard for a parent to answer about their child who died, it's really important to help find the 9 to 12-year-old somebody who can have this conversation. Because when we don't answer the question, now it begins to feel like you have something to hide or there's a secret. Wow. This would be an age group that might actually like to have a conversation with a funeral director.
Wow. That's interesting. How does everyone express their grief? Because they can do it differently.
So I love it when somebody comes and tells me the child is acting out. Let me tell you that acting out is simply a behavior. And usually those are behaviors that parents aren't excited about seeing, but it is a way of expressing something. So we sometimes will see kids under stress show us their stress in lots of different ways. And we can see changes in behavior. We can see emotional responses that are bigger. So if I as a child am having a tough time talking about how I feel because my sibling died, you may see the emotional response in being something really emotionally out of proportion to what happened. So I got a B on a paper in school, and suddenly all the tears are coming, and the teacher's going, I don't understand. I can't figure out why a B would cause all this. Like, this is so much more than that. This emotional response is the grief coming out. We also will sometimes see kids act younger, a regression of acting younger than how they were acting before. And it's really about trying to find a time in their life that was safe, that felt better. And so it's about trying to go back into time to say, if this was, last year I was a little bit younger, but things were going a little bit better in my life, so I would like to just take a time machine back to last year. The hardest part, Alan, with increased dependency is that this is a time, like you had said, when the parent is also grieving. And it can sometimes feel like this is the one moment when the parent feels like they have nothing left to give. And this is when this child needs something the most.
Wow. So let's talk about, children are in stress just like we are as adults when we're grieving. It's trauma and it's stress. Talk a little bit about that.
So the difference between children and adults, like I said, is adults are used to beginning to identify. Adults talk about stress. They can talk about what they're feeling, and they can even identify sometimes I'm a little snappy with someone when I'm feeling stressed. Kids have a much harder time. If you ask a child, why are you doing this, you're going to get a blank look because they truly don't know. But what you can see is when these behaviors are happening, instead of punishing the behavior, we need to identify this as a sign of stress. Now, it's okay, and it's really good to have boundaries and say it's not okay to hurt somebody because you're feeling stressed. I can understand you're feeling stressed. Let's find a safer way to express this. So for preschoolers, you may see somebody going back to bedwetting or thumb sucking, and I've seen kids get in trouble for this. And so it's really important to say, it seems like you're having a hard time. Let's have some extra hugs together. Let's do some other things. And then being able to say, but it's probably time to let go of the thumb after a while. The good news is, Alan, very few people have ever walked down the aisle at their wedding sucking their thumb. So it's not a crisis if this happens again. You might see more whining or fearfulness. One of the things that has happened for a child is the loss of this innocence, the loss of this feeling that nothing bad can happen to us and my parents can protect me from anything bad. So all of a sudden you might have a child who's suddenly afraid to let mom or dad leave today. And somebody who was fine being dropped off at school is saying, no, I want you to stay with me all day long. So it's okay for a little bit of that, but it's also important to help a child feel secure and to say, I know you're really nervous about mom leaving you today in class, but, Mrs. or Mr. So-and-so, your teacher, is a good, safe person too, and they have my phone number and they can call me if they need to. Daydreaming is one that teachers will sometimes get frustrated with, because they're saying it's like they're just not there. They're not paying attention. And that can be about thinking about memories about their brother or sister, or it can be imagining or having a fantasy about what heaven is like, or it could just be part of that. They're having a ping pong ball moment where all of a sudden a really strong, heavy emotion hits, and they're kind of checking out of class for a second. And so helping a child be able to identify that and put some limits around it. It's okay to have a couple of minutes of that. It's not okay to every day, every time you go to math class, to check out.
Right.
And you can see with teenagers. So our teenagers, it's really important to know, have an adult understanding about death. So they really do understand permanent, personal, universal, that it can happen anytime. And so for them, you actually see, I'm pointing at destructive actions here. You can actually see them testing the limits of life. And sometimes that feels really like the opposite. It's like, wait a minute, you're upset because your brother or sister just died. I don't understand why you're taking so many risks. And part of it's about, I'm not sure that I want to hang out on this planet right now. I'm not necessarily having a death wish. It's just I'm not sure. I haven't decided yet. And you can see them kind of tapping their toe on the line between life and death.
I get asked a question, and certainly with my experience too, with teenagers especially, because some of these signs of stress, are also signs that people have with their teenagers who aren't going through grief. And I think sometimes, Allie, and maybe you can comment on this, it's hard for us to tell, when excessive sleep or aggression, when that's just part of being a teenager and when it's a part of grieving. And my children were really good. My boys were awesome, because whenever they were in trouble or whenever I was trying to dig down and find out what was going on, you know, grief was always the reason for it. But it's kind of hard sometimes for us to discern between what is just normal teenage behavior, which some of these are, and which is grief-related. Do you have any thoughts on that?
You know, it's hard for the teenager to tease out the difference, too. Really, the difference is, when do you see more of it? It's hard when someone wasn't a teenager when the death happened, because you didn't know what they looked like as a teenager before. But the key thing is to make sure that we're checking in with them a lot and being able to try to help them give it a voice, and to say, you know, I'm really noticing that you're sleeping a lot. Have you been thinking about your brother or sister? Because, you know, I think about him a lot, too. What I think about, particularly for teenagers, but it works for all kinds of kids, is ask questions. There's no way to know, no matter how close you are with your kid, no matter what your relationship is, there's really no way to know until you ask. And give them a lot of invitations or opportunities to talk about how they're feeling, and then also be able to say, you know, you might not be able to give this a name, but I can tell you sometimes I feel angry, or sometimes I'm feeling pretty upset.
So you talk about magic wishes, too, which I've heard you talk about this before, which I think is fascinating. Talk about that a little bit.
You know, magic wishes is really important, and we think about it with younger kids, but I can tell you that as adults, we sometimes think about it too, right? We say, oh, I don't want to talk about that until I know it's for certain, or, you shouldn't speak bad of someone because something bad might happen. Magic wishes are really about, so young children, actually teenagers too, are self-centered, and I don't mean that in an ugly way. What I mean is that the world revolves around them from their perspective until they get older. And so they can sometimes have this thought that because they thought something ugly, that it caused someone to die. Alan, I've got to tell you, it took me years to admit to my parents that I believed that I had killed my brother. I had a conversation with him. My brother had cancer. There was he took a lot of time and energy and attention, and I didn't like that. And so I told my brother, you know, no offense or anything, but could you either get better or get lost? Like, I'm good with either one, but, like, get better or go back to where you came from. Well, in my mind, like, the very next day he died. Now, I can tell you that I don't think it happened that way. I think it was months later. But in my mind, those are all tied together. And it took me forever to tell my parents, because I was afraid they would hate me, because by saying that, I thought I had killed my brother. So, right. And then my mom said, oh, my gosh, I'm so glad you said that, because I thought I had killed him. And my eyes got really big, and I said, what? And she said, well, there were days where it was so hard to fight the cancer that I would say I wish that he would be at peace. And I thought that that meant that I had killed him. So let me say this thing about magic wishes, and it fits with fear, is that this is one of those things that a child will more than likely not come to you first about. And so there's a fear, and talk about living with this awful, horrible pit in your stomach. And so it's really important for grown-ups to address it first, to say, have you ever had a bad thought, or have you ever had a rough thought? And it's okay to have rough thoughts. And the best way to combat thinking about magic wishes is to say, let's all sit right here together and hold hands and wish that we won the lottery right now, or wish that a giant dragon would come and eat the room right this minute. And we're going to wish it as hard as we can, even harder than you wished whatever the other thing that you wished was, or the bad thing that you said about somebody. And then let's see what happens. And more than likely, you will not suddenly win the lottery, or a giant dragon will not come and eat the room that you're in. And then that will begin to poke a hole in this idea of magic wishes.
So children are going through a lot of the same emotions that we're going through. You know, fear is a part of our grief. Being scared is a part of our grief. Being sad. So I think what it all comes down to is, you know, we, as a parent, as a grandparent, as a sibling, I think the one thing that's universal is, who am I now? Am I still a dad if my child died? Am I still a sibling if my brother or sister died? Am I still a grandparent if my grandchild died? How do we begin to understand who are we now with this loss?
That's such a great question, because you're right. That really is. Am I still a sister if there's no brother to teach? Are you still a dad if one of your children has died? How do I fit in the picture, and where am I? One thing I did want to say about the scared slide, that was drawn by a little boy who had been told that his grandfather was looking over him, was looking down from heaven. Sometimes the things that are comforting to us as grown-ups can be terrifying to children. And so we just have to be careful what we say, and we got to check it out and say, maybe they look down on us when we're having a happy moment. We can give them a thumbs up, but they probably can't see us when we're taking a shower.
Right.
Or doing something wrong or getting in trouble. It's not like they're going to look down on us and rat on us to our parents. But who am I now is such an important question, because, and it's really tough for siblings. And let me share that with you, that siblings are in this boat where, you think about birth order, you think about who's the firstborn, you think about, are you the only girl or the only boy? Is it my job now to do the things that my sibling was going to do? Is it my job to take up their hobbies or their interests? Do I have to stop being who I was so that I can be who they were supposed to be? And sometimes siblings will say, I'm worried the wrong one died. My brother or my sister, they were the successful one. They were the one everybody liked. Maybe I should be like them. And do I have to live in the shadow of who they were going to be? Do I have to let go of who I was going to be so that I can be them? Or do I have to not worry my parents? Do I have to step up and be the caretaker for my parents instead of being this independent spirit that I wanted to be?
Wow.
And then the other thing that comes up a lot with siblings is this feeling of being invisible. This thought that my sibling who died is much more important than me now. Nobody has a shrine for me. I actually, when we moved, it was a couple of years after my brother died, and my mom hadn't realized she'd made a shrine for my brother until I was giving tours of the new kids in the neighborhood and charging $0.25 to go to the shrine. And my mom caught me and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "People have got to come and see the shrine." So protection games is this idea of kids feeling like they have to protect the parents, which is funny because then my mom told me that sometimes she felt like she had to protect me from her. And so I didn't want to show any strong emotions, or I didn't want to bring up talking about my brother because it made her cry. And she didn't want to cry in front of me because she thought that that wasn't the right thing to do. And finally we had to figure out, we're both crying, and why would we want to be crying in different rooms? And so it was really important, and she did this, and this was so helpful. It was really important that she could say to me, I'm sad because your brother died, and I love it when we talk about him. And so it's okay that we talk about him. In fact, it's good that we talk about him. And that was a way to open the door, and that's when we get to what helps the most, opening the door. Lots and lots of opportunities to find a way, because what works for me might not work for you. So instead of giving you specific things like a recipe book that we have to do, what I want to say is, how do we create a healing environment in our family? How do we create an environment that is accepting, that allows me to cry or not cry, that is compassionate, that says I love you and I care about you and I'm here for you, no matter, you don't have to be your brother or sister. I want you to be who you are. That helps to educate, that says, I'm going to give you information about what's going on. I'm going to share with you. If you have questions and you want to talk to the funeral director, great, let's go talk to the funeral director together. That offers hope, that says right now we're in the dark and it feels awful and I'm sad, but it's not going to feel like this every day, every minute of every day for the rest of our lives. And it has to be safe. And safe means it's okay for me to be mad today. It's okay for me to for you and I to feel different things on different days. And I don't have to walk around on tiptoes, and you don't have to walk around on tiptoes around me.
Wow.
I really love this slide, Alan, and I think this goes back to us protecting each other, right? Sometimes as
Yeah.
families, we're so afraid to do something wrong that we don't take the chance to do something right. It's like, I don't want to say the wrong thing, and so I stand over here, and we see this sometimes with friends too. We stand over here in silence, and the most damaging thing we can do is the silence. So let's forgive each other for the mistakes we'll make, and then work together to find a path together through our grief.
Wow. So how do we explain death to children?
Absolutely. So there are lots of books and coloring books, so I don't have to give you a lot of details about that. Let me tell you about the glove demonstration. So this is a really easy thing you can do with a winter glove, and it's so important, especially for young children, and especially if you're talking about there's a cremation. I will tell you, I was so upset the first time it rained after my brother was buried. I saw him go into the ground. I saw them put dirt on that casket, and then it rained, and I said to my mom, what is going on? We have to go outside, and we have to cover that grave and keep my brother from getting wet and cold. And so it's so important that we help kids understand that their sibling is not inside that body anymore. So the way we do that, and cremation, think about that. That's terrifying if you're young. So you put your hand inside of a glove, and the glove and your hand dance around, and you say, this is like your brother or sister when they're alive. This is like any of us. If you pinch one of the fingers on the glove, there's my finger in there. Ouch, that hurts. When a person dies, their spirit or their soul or whatever your religious beliefs are, whatever your beliefs are, the part of them that makes them who they are leaves their body. And the glove is like their body, and my hand is like their spirit. And you begin to take your hand out of the glove. And the hand goes up to heaven, or it goes wherever it is that fits with your belief. But the hand is no longer in that glove. And if we bend the finger of the glove back, it doesn't hurt our hand, because the piece that made you who you are isn't in that glove anymore. And so we go to the grave to connect with your brother or sister, to spend time there, to say we love you, but they are not inside that grave. The piece that we love is somewhere else. And that really helps to say, okay, all right, I'm not going to freak out if it rains. I'm not going to freak out if we move away from where that gravestone is. I can see my brother. I can spend time with my sibling anywhere that I am. I can talk to them, and they can hear me. And that's important. The other thing about a leaf is that you take a dead, dry leaf, and you talk about this is who we were before, and then you crumple the leaf up, and it breaks, and you say, can we put the leaf back together? And the answer is no, we can't put it back together exactly the way it was, because we're different. But we can take the pieces of that leaf and we can glue it on the paper with glitter and glue and other things. We can make it into something else. We aren't going to be back to who we were before our loved one died. But that doesn't mean that we have to stop being anything. We can be something beautiful. It's just going to be something different.
So let's talk a little bit now just about some ongoing concerns that grieving siblings will have and how we deal with those.
And this is the same, these concerns cross the age gap. So doesn't matter about different ages. This comes up for siblings, whether they're young kids or as they age and as they become adult siblings. So living in the shadows we talked about, finding the legacy of their life. How do I carry forward some of the things that my sibling loved without having to be someone else? So if my brother or sister loved to cook, how do I remember them and tell the story of them to new people? I knew my husband and I were getting close when I took him to my brother's grave, and I said, you know, you got to meet this other member of the family. Before you can come be part of the family, you're going to have to pass the brother test. And I took him to a cemetery, and when my husband didn't freak out, I knew he was a keeper. So how do you introduce your sibling to new people? Subsequent siblings, how do you explain if there's another child who's born into the family after the sibling died, so a younger sibling of the person who died, how do you share the stories and the memories with that person? How do we get through the wanting to overprotect? So sometimes parents, you're going through the same thing, right? You just realize the world isn't so patient that people can die, and we don't want to let kids go. So how do we balance overprotection with understanding that if you overprotect me, I might rebel? But let me tell you, Alan, it goes both ways. I was 16 years old. My mom and I were living together, and my mom was more than an hour late home from work. And we didn't have cell phones back then because that was the dark ages. And when that woman walked in the door, my first thing was to scream at her and say, "Where have you been? You are grounded. If I was this late coming home from a date, I would be grounded, so you are grounded." And then I realized that what I was worried about, I couldn't have told you that at the moment, but then we realized together that all of a sudden I was worried that my mom was going to die, that my mom being an hour late was that she was dead, not that she was just stuck in traffic.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about feelings.
Oh, go ahead.
Nope. I was just I was moving to the next slide here, and
Yeah.
as we're kind of winding down a little bit, to just talk a little bit about healing, and you know, how do children find healing in their grief, and how can we, you know, help them to do that?
Absolutely. So, Alan, it's so important that we help kids find a voice for their feelings, whether that's anger or fear or feeling alone. We have to help kids find a voice for their emotions, and we have to give them lots and lots of opportunities. One of the most important things is to be able to call something out and to say, it's normal to feel angry. It's normal to feel upset. The burden of anger is this activity that we can do that talks about sometimes people feel like if I hold it all in, then I'm protecting everybody else from my strong emotion. But we know that anger is one of the things that holding it in can make it toxic. And so the burden of anger is where we take a backpack and we put in lots of big, heavy rocks about that are, this is what I'm feeling angry about, and this is something else I'm feeling angry about, and I'm angry that he died, and I'm angry that God let him die, and I'm angry that you let him die, Mom and Dad. And as that backpack gets heavier and heavier, you say, nobody can carry this backpack alone. And so that's why we all have to come together to help carry this backpack. And as we unpack some of it and talk about it, the backpack gets lighter.
Yeah, and I like the visual demonstration in that.
Absolutely. And it really helps from a concrete standpoint for young kids, but let me tell you, it actually helps for teenagers too. Now, there's one thing I can tell you about anger is sometimes it's not okay to express your anger in the middle of a math test, while you're on the school bus, when you're talking to the principal. These are moments when you can't have it. So the other thing you can do is there's a stuff it activity. You take a film canister. I don't even think they have those anymore. So you take a little canister of some kind and little pieces of paper, and you write what I'm feeling angry about, and you stuff it inside, and you put it in your pocket. But the deal with it is, because you can't stuff it forever, remember the backpack gets too heavy, is you say the minute that it's safe, so when I'm after school or in recess or when I'm with my mom for the next time, then you pull out the piece of paper and you take a minute to express that emotion safely, because it can't sit in the film canister forever. You have to take it out and deal with it.
So we're actually, I mean, these are coping mechanisms, I guess we're talking about a little bit, is how to help children cope with anger and with grief.
Absolutely. The coping bracelet that's here is really, I call it a legacy bracelet, actually, that you put one bead for each special thing about your loved one that you want to remember. And when you touch it, it helps you remember. So my loved one made me laugh, and when I touch this, I think something funny about them. Or my loved one was a little mischievous. My favorite thing that a family told me that they did is they were all sitting around at Thanksgiving, and they were feeling really sad because, you know, their big brother had died, and they started to tell the stories about stuff that my big brother got away with that you didn't know about, Mom.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty soon, it was a pretty funny story until the mom starts to look at everybody else and go, so you knew about this and didn't tell me.
So there are activities we can do, and I mean that children, you know, using the hand, the heart, and the mind, and doing activities can also help children, can't it?
Absolutely. And when we think about what are your feelings on the inside and what do you show on the outside, you paint one thing on the inside of the mask, and you can do it with a paper plate, by the way, and you paint one thing on the outside and you say, this is what I show everybody, and this is what I'm feeling inside. And who can I show the inside to? Who can I safely show the inside to? And when is it okay to show the inside? Or painting on an umbrella and saying my loved one was someone who was a shield to me, and how do I create an umbrella that protects me like my big brother would have protected me? when you're coming up with something, and this is why I didn't want to give you guys too many specific things, because it's really all about making up what works best for your family. But there are a couple of rules. There are a couple of do's and don'ts, especially about anger, is that it cannot be personally destructive or harmful. And harmful can also mean if it were to get you in trouble, that counts as harmful. It cannot be destructive or harmful to others, because then it just increases your burden. It cannot be illegal or immoral. Can't destroy things that are not meant to be destroyed. Totally fine to go buy cheap garage sale china and smash it up against your wall if you want to. Not okay to break the stuff that somebody else really values and wants. And it cannot be unlimited in time or space. I tell people, grab a timer that when it's done, it makes a noise. And then when you're done, go out for ice cream, go do something fun, do something else. Because otherwise what happens is the fear is if I start expressing my anger, I will get lost in it and I'll never be able to stop. And so by creating boundaries, it makes it safe to express the anger.
And you know, Allie, I was doing a workshop one time, and your mom attended the workshop, and somebody had asked a question about anger. And she put a really unique spin on it, and I guess it helped me, and I think it helped the person who was asking about it. But anger doesn't always have to be destructive. It can be constructive. A lot of great things have happened in the world because somebody got angry and changed the law or started a foundation to raise money to do this. So anger is a release not only for adults, for parents, grandparents, but also for siblings. And maybe we can help our children sometimes take that anger and turn it around. Instead of being destructive, we can help them to make it constructive as well.
Absolutely. If you think about it, anger is similar to a fire, right? So a fire can absolutely destroy a forest, but it can also make s'mores. So it can warm a heart. And when we gather together around a campfire, we are sharing love and memories. And so what we don't want to do is make anger synonymous with danger. We've got to create a time and a space for it so that kids can learn how to safely deal with the anger that they're already feeling and find a space for it. So that, and remember, the key thing is to create safe boundaries for strong emotions. The strong emotions are there, and then we need to help them find a way to harness that power so that we say, okay, it's coming. It's natural and normal to have these strong emotions, and what do I do with it so that it doesn't destroy me? I love this picture. The question here is it a sunrise or a sunset? Kind of depends on which side of the horizon you're on.
Right.
The key thing with grief is that this is the moment as a family that it can separate us, can create more separation, or it's a moment that can help us pull together through these difficult moments. That it doesn't have to be the sunset of our lives. It can be the sunrise of a different phase of our lives. And that's the piece where we have to begin to help children find some hope in this moment. That we aren't going to be able to put the leaf back together, but that doesn't mean we should throw the leaf in the trash and say, that was the best thing that happened in our lives and we're done. It's so important that we all remember that we don't stop loving someone because they die. The people that we love in our lives, we don't lose them. They die, but the love continues on, and it continues to grow inside of us. And when we share the stories of our loved ones with other people, that is the thing that ties the legacy of their life and the life that we shared with them into the future and into the life that I'm going to live, and I'm going to have to carry that legacy forward. But I'm going to teach other people about the love that I had for my brother. And my mother would want me to make sure that you heard this. that there's anger, there's hurt, there's sadness. Grief has all of these things. But we have these feelings because we love them, and they loved us back. And so let us not lose the fact that there was love when we get into the moments of such pain and such sorrow. And so may love be what we remember the most.
Allie, thank you so much. You've done such great work in honor of Big A, Austin. and you continue to do that. And I think you've helped a lot of people tonight to understand, you know, how we can help siblings. I think as parents of siblings, we want to fix their grief, and I think you've helped us understand tonight that we can't necessarily fix their grief, but we can support our children in grief. There's some things that we can understand about age appropriateness, what they understand, how we can help them. But just like us, our children need support. And thank you so much for helping us. So much great information in here. And I just appreciate you so much. And thanks for being here tonight, Allie.
It was my pleasure, Alan. Thank you.
You have a great evening.
You too.